Hey everyone, and welcome. So think about it this way. If a democracy is like a computer, then political parties are its operating system. They're totally essential, right? But sometimes that OS can get, well, a little buggy. Today we're going to run a diagnostic on those bugs, the big challenges that political parties are facing, and then we'll check out the system upgrades needed to fix them. All right, let's jump right in.
And a huge welcome to all our Class 10 students watching. This topic is a really big deal for your exams. So, if you want to stay ahead of the curve with all our exam-ready content, just take a quick second, hit that like button, and definitely subscribe to the A1 Institute channel. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.
So why are we focusing on the problems, you might ask? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. Political parties are kind of a most visible face of democracy. When we're not happy with how things are going, who do we usually blame? The parties. So getting a handle on their challenges is absolutely key to understanding politics itself.
Okay, let's get into our first major challenge. This one's a critical bug in the system, the serious lack of internal democracy. And this is all about how decisions are actually made inside a party.
This right here really gets to the heart of the problem. You see this all over the world. There's this trend where all the power gets concentrated with just a few leaders right at the very top. A lot of parties don't even keep proper records of their members, they don't hold regular meetings, and they definitely don't have internal elections. So what's the bottom line? An ordinary party member has almost no say and very little clue about what's really going on inside their own party.
And you know that whole lack of internal democracy? It leads us directly to our next huge challenge, the problem of dynastic succession. Because think about it, when the process isn't open and fair, it's just way too easy for leadership to become a family business.
You can see it laid out pretty clearly here. Since there are no transparent rules for moving up the ladder, leaders often just end up favoring people they're close to, or worse, their own family members. And this means that the top jobs in a party can be controlled by just one family for generations. This is a massive problem for democracy because it just slams the door on ordinary, talented workers who want to rise up. And it can mean that people end up in power who, well, just aren't qualified to be there.
So, if merit isn't what gets you to the top, what does? Well, that brings us to our third challenge, and it's something that becomes painfully obvious around election time, the growing influence of money and muscle power.
See, parties are just so focused on one thing, winning. And because of that, they often take shortcuts. What does that look like? Well, they tend to pick candidates who either have a ton of money themselves or can raise a lot of it. And why? Because running for office is incredibly expensive. In some cases, parties might even back candidates with criminal records if they think that person gives them a better shot at winning. This huge reliance on money can really warp the whole democratic process.
All right, our fourth and final challenge is a little more subtle, but it's just as important. It's all about what happens when you, the voter, show up to the polls, and all the choices kind of start to look exactly the same. We're talking about the challenge of giving voters a truly meaningful choice.
If you look at major parties around the world lately, you'll see that the ideological gap between them is shrinking. When it comes to big economic issues, for instance, a lot of them basically agree on the fundamentals. And what that means for voters who want a genuinely different direction is that, well, they don't really have a meaningful choice. You can see this playing out when leaders just hop from one party to another. It just goes to show how similar their core beliefs really are.
So we've diagnosed all these bugs in the system, but is the whole operating system just broken beyond repair? Absolutely not. Now we're going to shift gears from the problems to the solutions and take a look at how political parties can actually be reformed.
Okay, so some really important upgrades have already been installed. First up, there was a constitutional amendment that brought in the anti-defection law. This basically stops elected officials from just jumping to another party whenever they want after an election. It makes sure they stick with the party that voters actually elected them to represent. Second, the Supreme Court made it a rule that all candidates have to file a formal statement listing their property and any criminal cases against them. And third, the Election Commission now requires parties to hold their own internal elections and file income tax returns.
But the job's not finished yet. Here are some of the major upgrades that are being talked about right now. First, a new law that would actually regulate the internal workings of parties, that could force them to be more democratic. Second, a mandatory quota, making sure at least 1/3 of all party candidates are women, which would be huge for representation. And third, the idea of the government funding elections to try and cut down on the influence of big money. These are all powerful ideas to make the whole system a lot more fair.
Now this is something we all need to remember. Legal fixes are one part of the puzzle. But as the source material says, the quality of democracy depends on the degree of public participation. New laws, by themselves, aren't some magic wand.
So here's the most important takeaway. Real, lasting change comes from people. It comes from ordinary citizens like you, from pressure groups, from social movements, and from the media, all pushing political parties to do better. When that public pressure starts to build, parties have no choice but to get serious about making changes. That is, by far, the most powerful tool that we have.
So always remember, the power to upgrade this system is really in our hands. To keep digging into these critical topics, make sure you check out our other explainers on this chapter. And hey, if you need any personalized notes, guidance, or help with admissions to get you totally exam ready, just contact A1 Institute. The phone number is right down there in the description. Thanks so much for watching.